Hello everyone, I'm Jhen and welcome to another episode of Monogamish Pod. On this week's episode, I'll be talking to Wanbli Ceya, who is an Oglala, Lakota, bisexual, polyamorous man. Wanbli is also a musician who goes by the name Juke, and he explores polyamory in those works as well. Check out my interview with Wanbli, and you can see this video also up on our YouTube page. Hello everyone, and welcome to Monogamish Pod, a podcast where I talk about things important about non-monogamy and polyamory. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I have people who kind of tell me about themselves and about what they do to make me feel better. And the theme for season 3 is going deeper. So I'm bringing in a whole new set of people. Some people you've heard of before, some people you haven't, to talk about their experiences in polyamory and non-monogamy and certain niche topics that I will be diving into. So today I have Wanbli with me. Wanbli is Oglala Lakota. I hope I said that correctly. And so we're talking about polyamory and non-monogamy and their music, because they are also a musician, which I also am not. So we're going to probably dive in a bit deeper into that. So Wanbli, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's kind of really awesome to ever have the opportunities to be able to, discuss polyamory and that experience, especially from an indigenous lens, like that and be able to just represent that. And I feel like there's never really enough of it sometimes, inevitably. I feel like with the world that we live in, it's kind of hard to have that representation. So I'm happy that I get the opportunity to do that, especially through my artistry, so on and so forth. So happy to be here.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. So why don't you tell the people a little bit about you, ASL, like how we do it in the olden days.
Like you said, my name is Wanbli. My Lakota name is Wanbli Ceya, which means crying eagle in my Lakota language. And as a singer-songwriter, I go by Juke, uppercase J-U-Q. I am an Oglala Lakota singer-songwriter based on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And yeah, I'm openly bi and polyamorous. And as well, I incorporate a story that is based on my journey of not only reconnecting to my Lakota Chilkan or my Lakota culture, but at the same time, my journey of learning to accept basically who I was and who I've always been. But, everyone goes through, especially being in a cishet mononormative white patriarchy, everybody goes through these same journeys. It's damn near tired. Yeah. What makes my situation unique is just the fact that I'm indigenous and the fact that I realized I was poly as well, aside from just being bi and other stuff around gender and whatnot. So, and, through my artistry, through the Oglala Wolf Puppy with PTSD, I kind of just lay out all these different things and kind of, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, but I put them in chapters, tempo, Nia, Yamni, Axel. Those are the first 4 chapters that are all out on all streaming platforms now. And it's a trip. I think anybody that fully dives in, there's a lot there to unpack throughout, everything that's been put out. And obviously the biggest thing right now is, my latest projects, both Yamni and Axel, because they're sort of both direct showcases of, I guess, how I experience our indigenous women, our indigenous men, how I, experience both of those demographics as a whole. And it was kind of just my opportunity to be so open and free. And that's sort of, where I'm at now, where I get to be represented or be on, on productions or whatever that, give me the opportunity to just be myself. And so it's, it's been quite a journey nonetheless. This has been probably consistent for the last 5 years. And now I'm just seeing probably the biggest kind of uptick, and it's powerful. It really, really is. And seeing a lot more people become so understanding and open and like, I don't know. It's like you articulate things in a way and people will see it. You know what I mean? It's like inevitably, no matter if they're anti or not, like, it's like at the end of the day, I want people to know, and I want especially the youth coming up to know, to have those tools to be educated and to be able to, possibly know themselves if they're the same way as me. I wish I would have had healthy representation growing up for me to really understand that stuff,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, healthy representation is a thing that I think a lot of people lacked growing up, coming to terms with, sexuality, with gender, with all the roles that society has put on us, for sure. So I'm going to take it back to the beginning with you. We're going to start at the start, okay? So you said you live on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. I've never been to South Dakota. Is it pretty? That's probably my first. It's a useless question, but I just want to know, is it pretty
Yeah,
there?
the thing about like I said, obviously anybody that could look into in regards to what has taken place with Indigenous people, it's all on Google. You can do that. I don't have to detail in regards to that, but in pertinence to like South Dakota, and at the end of the day, regardless of how things went down, and now we're on these reservations, even the reservations are still beautiful, especially in proximity to the Black Hills. That's where majority of this stuff really was like a dilemma with the Black Hills and the gold, so on and so forth. But all in all, it's like the only thing that makes South Dakota so obviously like frustrating to be in is mostly white Republican demographic here. That was pretty much that's really it. Otherwise, it's amazing because I have my people here. I still have my
Yeah.
culture and language so prominently here, and it's that's the piece of it all. And but at the same time, we live, we're only getting to a certain point, because we've had enough of our own people like speak up. Otherwise, South Dakota has been very detrimental to my Indigenous people, even to Black people, even to obviously LGBTQ plus and women. Anybody anybody who's here fully knows the scope of how toxic this place really can be in too many different ways. But otherwise, the land, there's a lot of gorgeous. My people are here. There are still really good people here, and it's it's very small. Obviously, it's very rural. It's not. We don't even have population wise, I think 1 million people in the state. So we're still it's
Oh,
literally
wow.
just a giant small town.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. All right. So you're born and raised in South Dakota. Have you ever lived anywhere else?
Well, with my situation, it was a bit more different. I came back about 5 years ago, and so I basically grew up in this small town in Iowa, Humboldt. And so once again, that's the same kind of dynamic, even more so, just less native, less of my people. Obviously, there's only the Meskwaki people over in like the southeast side of Iowa. Other than that, I was basically
Hmm.
it was peak assimilation. I was really assimilated out of
Yeah.
my culture, and it's because that's because my mom and my aunt, they were adopted out when they were about 6 months old, but they reconnected later in life, which is kind of why I,
Hmm.
know so much of my family here. Obviously now more than ever, but even before then, I knew a lot of my relatives and stuff like that. And I always heard sort of the same old kind of like anti-indigenous rhetoric in regards to my own community, where everything's always shaming of our own, people, shaming of everything that goes on here, which is all due to systemic issues, really. And so it's like I kind of always grew up with these mindsets of like, I don't know. It was like I felt like I was just completely detached. And then until I kind of got this motivation to get back here about 5 years ago, because I was working with an independent label at the time that was based in Rapid City. I just kind of felt like became this opportunity to do music and reconnect to who I am. So it was, it became a thing five
Hmm.
years ago when I finally made that leap, and now I'm here. Now I'm in a completely different space, not working with that label, not working with a few different other people, and now kind of fully in my own space. And that ultimately also ended up, leading me to accept that I was bi and polyamorous. It's kind of weird when sometimes like we're never fully aware of like the impact of like the situations we're dealing with, and even how
Hmm.
things are happening to us, specifically on a systemic level. I feel like I became more increasingly aware of like how much I was being constantly shamed out of everything about me, even when I
Yeah.
wasn't fully, even when I think that people were presenting themselves left and right, and I didn't really know how to like process it or think of it, as like, oh, maybe people are picking up on everything about me. Some people
Yeah.
like there were people who knew that I was polyamorous before I ever came out, which is such a strange response. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a strange thing. Like, some people can pick up on that more than anything. And like I said, I also kind of deal with stuff around my gender as well, and that's the same thing where people can kind of pick up on that I can feel like both simultaneously sometimes. And so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so crazy when sometimes people see you before you like fully see yourself. And then now you're just embracing everything.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where we call it a glass closet, right?
Hmm.
Where it's like there are people who they haven't accepted that they are queer and everybody else around them knows and everyone else around them knows. And it's just kind of like when you finally accept yourself, you're finally there, you're kind of like, hey guys, I'm this, and they're like, okay, thanks for telling us.
Thank you.
We
Thank you
already knew.
for
But
confirming
cool.
probably what we assumed in some capacity. And I just thought it was so funny because it was just like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like now more than ever, it was like, well, thank you. I was like, thank you for, like, that's so flattering that you thought I was like bi and thought I was poly. Like, you guys already knew that. So it's cool, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
the thing that I end up kind of like dealing with, I think, that could just come with the fact that I am physically a man. In a nutshell, it's like, there's a whole different attitude towards me because the hardest thing, and I know that if any of my natives listen to this, is that Indian country still has a complicated anti-LGBT problem, and that just comes from the boarding schools. It comes
Mm.
from a lot of generational trauma. It has nothing to do with our cultures and languages, and it's really heartbreaking, because I have dealt with
Yeah.
it personally, pretty heavy at the same time. But it's like also at the same time, there's such a large movement for it than ever now. I think a lot of the people that are even still, anti-LGBT are just now on the low with it because they don't want to blah blah blah. You know what I mean? In the
Yeah.
climate that we're in, it's just such a different, but it's now like gives me the space in that room to be more authentic to myself than I've ever been before, which is really, really awesome. But at the same time, I think that I end up dealing with that weird sense of privilege because I can still pass in that sense to in
Mm-hmm.
basically pass to the cis het mononormative white patriarchy because I can still identify as a man and I
Yeah.
still like women, and you know what I mean? Like, oh, I like, within the story, the whole thing that I kind of decided to focus on was like, I wanted to give people polyamorous representation to a T. Like, I wanted to go like, okay, what would be the craziest, I guess, relationship circumstances? Because I've had my own things, but never to like what is, I guess, articulated in the story, which is the three wifeys and a hubby dynamic, which was like the kind of concept
Mm-hmm.
of the
Yeah.
basically literally this the first four projects were kind of like the three wifeys and a hubby era because in the story, Tempo, Nia, Yami, Axel are the first three are the wifeys and then the hubby, and I wanted
Yeah.
to really relay the kind of nuance that comes with that and how those polycules can be so unique and different and everybody's situations can be so unique. And I was just like, no, let's just go wild with it. Let's just freaking, I'm like, at the end of the day, these people are going to be anti-poly in some capacity. So I'm just going to fully crank it up to like 100. And I
Yeah.
want people to really feel it for what it is. I want people to really understand. One thing that I think, coming out as poly, like, it made me inevitably become more in touch with like my Lakota culture's matrilineal contingency. Because I feel like in polyamory, everything in any capacity, I guess, unless you're like in a situation with all men, everything is always like kind of based around women and everything that they have to say. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That?
I
It's
was just thinking about
like
that.
women have the first and foremost, like so much. And it's like, that's my like mindset. It's like the thing that I've dealt with in my past because, like I said, I've had my dynamics. It's like women who were just absolutely shamed out of everything. You know what I mean? It's like I said, from the generational trauma, that is pretty bad in my community. It's like there's a lot of women who will, they're going to deal with the same contingency, but they'll be more prone to, like, I guess, accept themselves because we still do have those certain attitudes that, oh, we expect women to do this, this, and this. They have the emotional capacity to do this, even though men can have that too. It's like they can also. It's not just like, oh, women are just more emotional. It's like kind of, but not really. Like it's like I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
it's illogical in every way, shape, or form. But it's like that's been my kind of biggest cadence. Is like, I wanted to just have something that was completely raw and real before I give everybody this huge debut album next year, and they feel, then they
Yeah.
get even more at like, because I have big, huge plans and I want to really secure that as this thing. But I fully wanted people to feel everything that can be in polyamory. There can be very sexual situations, there can be non-sexual situations, and And I'm just articulating, hey, I'm used to all of that. I'm used to all this nuance, and relationships can
Mm-hmm.
look like really almost anything, and love can almost look like anything. And I feel like being able to do that and even have this like kind of level of like push and recognition through, you know, I don't know if you had heard of him yet, but you know, just recently I got like a big, massive push through TikTok by my friend Modern
Yeah.
Warrior, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just like he was really incredible. He used my song "Star," which just got an animated music video, which really showcases the dynamic with like the three wifeys in the story. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful. And what Modern Warrior did too, because he has about I think now he's almost 2 million followers on TikTok, which is insane.
Yeah. I'm one of them, so I,
Yeah.
I know exactly who you are. I am like a low key part of watching native
Mhm.
talk, as we call
Mhm.
it. I like to be aware of different cultures, especially of people that live in the same place
Mhm.
that I do.
Right, right,
So
right.
it's like I live in the United States. This is not
Mhm.
my land,
Mhm.
so I'd like to know what people who originally are from here are doing.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why it was so cool to really feel that sense of validation. And then I was in Indian country today, and I was like even featured on my local news TV station, as well as the one of the main radio stations around here, which is just incredible. I don't like, you know what I mean? It's such a validated contingency to be able to be representation for something that was aggressively, you know, basically written off as like nothing. You know what I mean? All the
Hmm.
representation I ever saw for
Yeah.
polyamory was, ugh, I hated those YouTube videos. Did you ever see those videos where it was like, you know, like a generic, a guy and two girls kind of dynamic, whatever. And it's always like two of those people seem like they're way more into each other than the other person. You know what I mean? Like the women are, though
Yep.
that kind of like, oh, that's
Hmm.
so
It's
ugly. Because I've
yeah.
never felt that. I've never experienced that in my life. It was just usually whatever. Like some things ended, you know, things end. But I've never seen like I've never seen that in real, like how, like who did they get these for these, like who did they get for these projects? Because I don't see those dynamics ever. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
think it's so
I,
goofy and just toxic. Like it's so ugly.
it It is. It's interesting because you never see those dynamics, and sometimes that's all I see. But that's also, I think, a lot to do with the kind of people who show up in online spaces for polyamory and non
Right,
monogamy,
right.
right? So I can just say that there's so much patriarchy and heteronormatism still baked into the idea of polyamory in this, US context. I'll even just talk specifically about in the United States. Let's not talk about in Jamaica where I'm from, just this
Mhm.
here, right? And so I've recently joined some polyamorous Facebook groups in the pandemic because it was something I was always planning to do. And then I was like, oh, well, let me just do
Hmm.
the thing. So I did the thing, and it was like, oh, okay. So this is the same shit with like a different thing over it. And I recently had a conversation with one of my very good, close polyamorous friends about how hierarchy presents itself. We talked about, patriarchy and how that shows up, and how a lot of coupled people, married, nested, whatever, are just seeking someone for enjoyment and not actually looking to build
Mhm.
partnerships. And like that was coming out so much in our conversation where it was like, oh, do you have negative stories? Because we all have those. If you've ever been in a situation where it's kind of a triad, but not
Mhm.
really, like you're the odd one out
Mhm.
on the end. You're just kind of like the toy. They take you out when they want to play with you, and then they put you back
Mhm.
when they're done
Mhm.
with no concern for you. And I think that's a lot of people's, as a single person, start into non-monogamy is a situation like
Mhm.
that. And so watching those kinds of things, hella triggering for me. There was a show, Polyamory, Married and Dating. It had Kamala Devi. She's a pretty big poly influencer in a certain
Mhm.
space. And there was this one particular union. I remember this vividly. The wife was a dancer. The husband owned a
Mhm.
gym, and their girlfriend worked at the gym as the receptionist slash office manager. And so the wife would be out, and she would be like teaching classes, whatever. And the husband and the girlfriend would be
Mhm.
home, or, relaxing in the pool, walking the dog, making dinner. So the wife was the odd one out in the relationship because she had a whole separate job outside of them and a whole separate life outside
Yeah.
of them. and they made her feel so bad. Like they would just be like, "Oh yeah," she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna make dinner. Do you guys want anything?" "Oh no, we already ate." Like just even little things like
Mhm,
that. No sense of community between the three of
mhm,
them.
mhm.
And she eventually went on to cheat on them, and it was a whole thing. But I was like, do you blame her? You're making her feel like a stranger in her own
Exactly.
house. Like she feels
Mhm,
nothing.
mhm,
But yeah, this is just to say this is the shit I see on TV as well, and see I've seen in real life as well.
mhm.
So just to frame that as a yeah, I know this.
Exactly,
This is real.
exactly. And so it's like, I feel like I wanted, obviously, inevitably, to give away something that is just completely the opposite of that. It's like at the end of the day, I honestly, it's like the hardest part too is that like if it wouldn't be necessarily as bad if that wasn't the only representation you were giving us. Like if it wasn't the only thing,
Yes.
and it's like that's only because you're trying to bastardize this whole entire thing because you don't want to try to articulate this in a cadence where, oh, this could be beautiful. This doesn't have to be this ugly, heartbreaking, messed up, goofy process, whatever. Like how it's always portrayed. It doesn't. It can actually be something very, very magical. And it's like that was how I
Yeah.
even discovered my own personal cadences of how I prefer things because it's like within the context of the story, like that's what I feel like, when it comes to women, I feel like I do really, really love when things are like a triad or a quad when it comes to women. I feel more at peace and kind of comfortable. It was kind of like when I had it, because I was in a triad, it was just I don't know what it is. It felt like anything to have more of the divine feminine kind of in my world in my life is always something that is just preferred and nice and ultimately
Yeah.
I think that I you know what I mean, it's like I see a lot of different times where it can be of benefit, obviously. I mean, in the context of the world we live in today, it's like being able to have more people involved in a dynamic. Obviously there's more money there's more everything, there's a lot of like actual
Yeah.
even context that I've talked to even to relatives around here about it, you know what I mean, because we're a lot. I mean, like I said, the reason why I feel like it can be so, I guess, defiant and open about who I am is because I come from a culture and language that already fully accepted LGBTQ plus and non-monogamy and polyamory. So much so into the to the degree that women had, women, like I said, like under my culture, it was like women actually had like full autonomy in this cadence. It was
Hmm.
like it was pretty common for, especially I guess maybe certain like the most desirable women, whatever, to like have like multiple suitors. It was kind of like a thing for her to end up possibly having multiple husbands. Unless, and it was circumstances for men, it was more common for them if they were more so of wealth in our communities, like if they were like a chief or a medicine man, and those were just like significant societal roles for our people. That was normally the more common
Hmm.
circumstances where you would probably see them having a second wife, and it was more so because of just of what those men were, and it was not this like objectification of a woman or women. It was just societal roles. This man has a lot to tend to, and that women are there to be, at least the roles that were given in those times were, they were tending to the
Yeah.
homes, setting up the teepees, doing all
Yeah.
that hard
Home and
work, really
hearth.
hard
Yeah.
work that that it's and that's even more so like because like a lot of the things that even in my own culture, gender roles, so on and so forth, there's a sense of fluidity there too. Women could do the things that men were normally doing, or men could be doing the things that women were normally doing, etc., down to whatever else, and so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, now we live in a whole different paradigm now because of literal trauma from the massacres, the boarding schools, so on and so forth. The peak, we were
Yeah.
getting hit with it, just as we are today. We were getting under this social infrastructure. We're getting hit hard, like harder, obviously, than white people, even though they can still deal with it too. And so it's like now I saw it more than ever to be like I kind of have to be defiant and like speak against, you know what I mean, like be someone that speaks out against it or
Yeah.
brings representation to it, you know. And it's a big thing. I have not gotten over Lil Nas X dropping Montero. I have not gotten over the music video. I haven't gotten over that song. It's like no,
Yeah.
because literally it is so vivid. Like I honestly create this like every single time I create this like how do I want to describe it? Kind of like a Mockingjay kind of situation where it's like me, the three wifeys, and the
Yeah.
hubby. are like these chosen avengers fighting against this imperialist
Yeah.
genocidal society, against everything, and it becomes this like big thing. And I was literally like imagining it to that song, and then now I'm like, I'm gonna, whenever I get to this debut and start producing more for it, I'm like, I'm gonna really come up with a crazy, crazy visual, whether it's live or if I just do animation again, which I really, really do love doing. And I was like,
Yeah.
because I want people to deal with that. I was like, it was another part where I was like, no, like, I want y'all to deal with that. Like, probably the most beautiful relationship that this world has ever seen is a polyamorous one. Like that, I feel like that's so divine in
Yeah.
its own essence, and I fully want to like give that. Just in opposition, when you create this sort of oppressive social environment and these sort of regular toxic issues that we see, these toxic relationship tropes perpetuated constantly through every visual, and how it hits our lives respectively, and how obviously how ugly the mindset around non-monogamy and polyamory is. It's like, of course it's gonna, you're gonna talk like this, you're gonna expect the people that like you're hurting it through this, you know what I mean, like, to snap out of it and come harder. I was like, because I, at the end of the day, it's one thing to deal with, like, you're already dealing with, I guess, when you're LGBTQ plus, you just end up dealing with the on the low people. And then it's the same thing with
Yep.
polyamory, the same thing with non-monogamy. I Especially with women primarily, obviously, once again, just
Hmm.
indigenous misogyny repackaged is great. And I
Please.
know, yeah, yeah, exactly. And so it's like, but then like it's with, it's something that I've had to deal with, like retrospectively, especially in regards to gender, because I feel like a lot of the times, like, I'll just end up involved with like men that are almost like they're literally straight. And it's like kind of
Hmm.
the weirdest, funniest kind of like, because whether they're closeted bi or whether they're just attracted to that femininity, which I've seen a lot of men kind of, that's the really thing that men get themselves screwed over with, at least in their heads, because it's like, even in my own culture, like, that's how things kind of were. Like, whether you were a cis woman, like a trans woman, or just a femme presenting being, you were kind of considered to be like wifey material and like desirable. Like, our men didn't think too much, didn't look too much into it. So it was kind of like,
Yeah.
it's such a crazy thing to have to go from like what our social infrastructures were and how warm and loving that we were, to just how vile and like cold things can kind of like can be in general, regardless of who you are, but then even more specifically when you come from these demographics, and that's how
Yeah.
I always look at it. We grew up in a world that was always so aggressively anti-indigenous, anti-black, and that was like only anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ plus, anti-non-monogamy, polyamory, because they didn't want us to like take back who we are. They didn't want me to, they didn't want us,
Yeah.
and it's like, I've even, especially because of TikTok, especially because of just various, like, I hear the same things in regards to like the real, like, authentic cultures, and for Black people in Africa to everywhere else. None of them were really ever anti-LGBT. Some of them were. I remember hearing about one specifically where they didn't even like gender really anybody until they were about like 7 or 8, where they were like, where there was more of that realization of who they specifically were.
Yeah.
That's how vulnerable or sensitive. Like, you were just basically a genderless baby for a certain amount of like. And I think that, once again, it's like, that's the same cadence. It's like the whole mechanism and everything that's here, it was just designed to like, it's hard. I think it gets to a certain point. There's been a few moments where I feel like, it's like, dang, they really did kind of commodify every single freaking thing. Like, they commodified love and relationships and monogamy and the nuclear, family, having kids. Everything is a result of a very messed up social infrastructure that is funded by capitalism as a whole. And you know, now we're we're like in the end of it. We're in late stage capitalism.
Yeah.
We're watching beyond insanity going on because of greed, because of power, because of wherever this, whatever
Yeah.
capacity, and it's happened everywhere. And I think that's kind of like the thing that I feel like I've been trying to get into a mindset of like, how can I tell this story? How can I be my authentic self and avidly be a part of changing this stuff? And that was a lot of what the Oglala Wolf Puppy was. And then, as things progressed and I just really understood myself, and now it's like, wow, this is becoming a lot more powerful than I think I could have ever imagined. And that's what I
Yeah.
think is so, it's exciting, but it's also just like overwhelming, because then it feels like going back to the Montero song, there was that little line where he's like, now I can't leave. And now he's just
Yeah.
like, kind of like, it's like, I feel like I'm thrust into a position now that like I can't go back. I mean, I don't want to, obviously. I don't want to go back from being very sincere and being like authentic and honoring everything that I want to do and everything that I am, and what my vision upholds, because I think inevitably what the end result is something so much more powerful, And I think all of it
Hmm.
really does have to do with the fact that, I have to be able to show people, I guess, that nuance, that love is always come in so many different forms. And the sooner we can kind of get back
Yes.
to that embrace and that warmth, like truthfully, we're going to see a lot of things heal. And then we're going to see a lot of things dramatically change amongst just everyday people, And that's what I'm looking forward to, I think, inevitably, is like it will get so much better for like future generations as a whole. But it just depends on what we do now, inevitably. We
Yeah.
shape those things. We
Absolutely.
shape a healthier world, that has, so that people can have the opportunity to just be everything they are and love the way they love, and all of that nuance,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it also is like that sense of community that we used to have back in the day.
Hmm.
Pre-capitalism, the way it exists in the structure now,
Hmm.
it's not present anymore. I mean, I have had a conversation running for the past several weeks amongst friends and people that I know. It's like, okay, if you feel romantic love, what does that look like? And how does that differ from any other intimate relationship you have? What is the thing that makes that different? And a lot of people are just like, well, yeah, like we have sex. And I was, okay, I mean, but that's sex. What else is it? Like, what is the difference between the relationship you have with your romantic partner and what you have with your best friend? And I use best friend very specifically because that would be like the closest non-sexual relationship that you
Hmm.
have, right? Like, what's the difference? Is sex is the only difference? In which case, then why aren't we valuing those platonic connections at the same level that we are valuing these so-called romantic connections? If the only thing different is that our genitals aren't touching,
Hmm.
then what is, and of course that also excludes aromantic people and asexual people, because then it implies that they can't have true meaningful connections without
Hmm.
sex or without romance. And it's like it's this weird structure that we all live in, and of course it's all connected. Thank you, oppression, my favorite. you know that. And so I think it's so interesting that you talk about that and how the original culture was, and the original set how we all interacted with each other and how your culture interacted with each other. So I want to take it back a little bit to, what was the first non-monogamous relationship that you had?
Hmm. So this was more so obviously how, the timeline that we were talking about, I hadn't even fully entertained anything along these lines prior to coming back here. I literally, right when I
Hmm.
turned 21 is basically when I got out here. And so that was that. And it was more so probably, I think, a couple years in, because I have a very interesting time when it comes to love. And I think a lot of times in regards to my own music, I think that I can try to sort of gloss things up in a lot of different ways, as opposed to like acknowledging some of the cruddy stuff that kind of took place before I fully came out and fully
Hmm.
understood everything. But it was probably, I was like, when was it exactly? I think it was just before I had released my first like project and everything. I had met a girl, and she was really sweet. I've had this weird trend in my life, and it's something that I have never quite understood, and it's my relationship with bi women as a whole. They
Okay.
somehow always manage to find their ways into my life, like no matter what, no ifs, ands, or buts. And they always happen to be
Yeah.
pretty open to a lot of different things. And like, obviously in the ramification of just the casual thing, I was like, let's try something fun. And we kind of met another girl through a mutual friend of ours, and it was initially just going to be this like, okay, we had just kind of agreed it was going to be fun or whatever. It wasn't like we were trying to entertain, like, let's try to do this. So like I literally already deleted that whole entire construct of polyamory, but it just kind of became a thing where we became like, we wanted to make it a thing in general. Like, we were more around each other. And so it just kind of happened. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And it was just like kind of insane because it was just the hardest thing in the world. I think obviously, like, it's that realm of like dealing with biphobia as a man, where it's obviously, once again, it's like, oh, you're just gay, you're not really into women, blah blah blah, that
Yeah.
crap. And so I feel like there were a lot of instances where I felt like I was really just vulnerable or very sensitive when it came to women. I'm very sensitive to men as well, but I'm like way more sensitive to women, and that has a lot to do with having my mother, where she's her emotional issues, her drinking issues, etc. And so when I had actually fully, you know, experienced this, it was just kind of like, I don't know, I felt a lot safer than I ever really did before. But then
Yeah.
it just felt more akin to, it just felt like real. It felt like, oh, this is, and it's so weird to try to process that from the mentality of just being physically a man, because I feel like, is this just me being a man that would obviously like to have two women? Or is it just like, is this just my comfort zone? Is
Hmm.
this really where I fit more? Because I'm not sitting here trying to constantly like be involved in every, like, I'm not the type of weird messed up dude that would be like, oh, we have to make sure it's like us and like we're talking and that, or like, because I had seen all kinds of crap even through whatever, because just the amount of
Yeah.
stupid people that try out polyamory. Yeah, they're
Astounding. Just
mainly
astounding. Yeah.
just being real, the white ones, mainly the white poly people, they're usually the ones who are doing
Yeah.
the worst of it. Like, I'm gonna be real, I've never not came across that. And so like, it was just like, god damn, it was like, okay, like, because my main thing is like, after seeing inevitably what I had experienced growing up, from just the overall environment of it all, with the women in my life, my grandparent, my grandma, and my mom and my aunt, and seeing a lot of the turmoil and the pain they had dealt with, like being in a world that was so aggressively, even more aggressively misogynistic during their, younger stuff,
Yeah.
it was like, I was the type where I couldn't help but see that, you know what I mean? I couldn't help but see everything they were feeling and going through. And I knew no matter what, like, that's what I was going to do when it came to like women as a whole. But it's like, when your feelings, you just kind of bat things back. It's like, oh, come on, that's not like real. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't, this whole
Yeah.
thing isn't like, it was. And I think I was, even during that time, because it went for a few months, our relationship, and it wasn't, we didn't end badly or anything like that. But it was like, I feel like we couldn't even believe it for a second ourselves either. Like, it's that constant like doubting of
Yeah.
our own feelings all the time, even if something's working. And it's like,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
like, it's just, it's internal. It really is, and no one ever thinks that that could ever be there. That anti polyamory. It's like, no, it is there. I promise. Like, I've experienced it. I literally kind of lost out on something that I'm not like whatever, just devastated by or anything. It just gave me that insight. This particular situation that eventually, a few years later, I was finally able to come to terms with it, and really just accept that like, I will have to deal with these sort of complicated things. It would be so nice to like be in a cadence where somehow I just meet all of these women at a certain place, or I meet this guy too, and then we all just decide right then and there we're gonna do it. I'm like, that's not usually how it works. It usually is. It's like,
No.
that's not like, that'd be cool, I guess, but like it's usually, it is just a case by case situation as you meet new people, or whatever you're personally looking for in regards to your love life, and so on and so forth. It is a process. You actually have to form these real, sincere relationships and let things build up as they go along. And
Yep.
I think that, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, depending on how certain people are when it comes to sex, so on and so forth, that a lot of times, I think as far as I'm concerned, a lot of these situations benefit from just dating, not like trying with the expectation of sex or anything, like strictly just getting to know people.
Yeah.
Because and I think that that's been a big thing for me too. It's like, I've never felt like I'm a sexual being as well. Obviously, if you listen to Yamini or Axel, you'll definitely feel how how much of a sexual being I can be. But it's like at the same time, I've never prioritized love, and I've never prioritized just having people that truly click. More than like
Yeah.
than now, obviously, where now it's like, okay, I feel like now I just feel more like sincere. I feel like this is it. Like this is boom, boom, boom. I feel like even if it's like, when it comes to the people that want to get mad about labels, etc., that it's another thing, etc. I remember seeing somebody say something along the lines of like, why don't you, oh yeah, it was when that Indian Country Today article came out, and the guy who wrote the article opted to use like polyamorous, a part of the title. So it was like polyamorous Oglala Lakota artist gets a TikTok boost. That's what it said. And obviously that's gonna get a response. That's very much gonna get a response. I'm like, oh,
Yeah. That's an attention grabbing headline on purpose for clicks.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, there's gonna be like the thing that was a big moment in that stuff, because for one, it was flattering as hell in the sense of like that there were so many other incredibly other articles about other big things going on in Indian country, but mine, in regards to all the TikTok stuff and my animated music video and these projects, like was one of their best performing articles, period, which was insane to me. I was like, oh my god, that's so cool, that's so sweet. But oh my god, it was just there were like I said, there were a few there. There was mostly supportive, which made me very happy. There was a lot of people who actually came and support. A lot of elders even that stuck up in regards to me, and which was really sweet. But there were some people that were just like they were kind of whining about, why would you include polyamorous in regards to like my identity? Why wouldn't you just say you're single? Because that's basically like, that's not, because I'm not. I mean, if you want to play with the technicality, I guess I kind of am, like, because I mean,
Yeah. Because I'm not saturated, so I'm single because I'm open, but
yeah.
like I'm
Like, oh my
not.
god, like these are still committed relationships, whether you want to deal with it fully or not. I was like, and I mean, and that's the worst part too, is that I feel like it's just a whole different, it's a whole different ballpark. It's like, oh, you're not just bi anymore, now you're poly, and then I'm all this like, I was like, ugh. It's it's just such a, it's so interesting to me how people can have, it's like you just never really know what's fully there until you feel it. One person commented, why include polyamory in the thing? And then somebody, literally, it was just some person, I don't even know, they said he likes VD, he likes venereal disease. I'm like,
Like, I mean, come on. And I think those sayings are so antiquated because like poly people for the most part are always the ones getting tested. Like it doesn't make any sense.
I was like,
Like
'cause we know we will run that risk for solely because we're gonna meet new people. We're gonna have more new. Of course, we're gonna like make sure people, like anyone we get involved with, is healthy, or that we're healthy, and like more than anything, like anyone with half a freaking brain would be doing that. Like you should be doing that in general, regardless of your dynamics. I'm sorry, like.
yeah, I mean, I think if you are in a monogamous partnership, there's that expectation that nothing can ever happen, and it's not that
Mhm.
simple because there are some STIs that you don't have any symptoms until you
Mhm.
do. Like, if you have HPV, you don't know you have it until you
Right.
do. Same thing with herpes. You do not know you have it until you
Yeah.
do. And it doesn't mean that your current partner gave it to you or that anyone just, these are just things that I feel like people do, I'm going to do a whole episode about STIs, by the way, and
Mhm.
polyamory. This is just upsetting to me at levels all the
Mhm.
time. But there's that expectation that's like, oh, you're dirty, especially like when you're queer. You're queer, you're poly. Oh, you're dirty. Like this is what you get. Like if you have, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
like it's not. That's not how I think about it. I'm not dirty. Thank you. So I just happen to have an
Yeah, no,
STI. That's
exactly.
it.
It's a natural thing that can happen in regards to sex, no matter what sex you have. Like, I don't know. It's like that the whole entire dynamic just has to, like, it's not proper and it's not real to like human beings and people and and interactions. Like, because it's bound to be there. All you can do is protect yourself the best you can. Obviously, use protection. Be aware of people, what's people's statuses, are they, I mean, it's like, and getting rid of the whole the dirty
Yeah.
clean crap, that dialogue around it.
Exactly.
It's just ugly. It's like, no. But yeah, I mean, it's still a whole another cadence for people to have that understanding, or in regards to the real authentic nuance to polyamory and non-monogamy. It's you to even get to that point to like really not see polyamory as this thing that you just do, but this thing that actually is no matter what, whether you choose to acknowledge that you're polyamorous or non-monogamous or not, like it's your feelings, it's the thing, it's these things that you inevitably know deep down. If I was to get into a monogamous situation right now, whether it's a woman or a man or any non-binary whatever, it was like I know I will be essentially half a person. Like I'm not like I'm not going to be real,
Yeah.
a major part of me even learning to accept that I was bi was just the internal acceptance that what I want when it comes to women, or what I want when it comes to a man, it's like these are so prevalent. It's like why am I forced against my will to only experience one of those things? Why? What's the point of that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
What was the
especially
reason? Like Cardi B, what was the reason?
exactly. And it's like what's the, you know what I mean? It's like, especially in the realms of like, well, like if I meet people that are perfectly fine within them, what's still the qualm? What's really the qualm? It's because it's not monogamous, because it's not the preferred, the thing that we've rammed down your throats through all forms of media constantly over and over and over again. It's not what we rehearsed for you. And it's because of that, like, like I said, it's like, I mean, even in Yamni or even in Axel, there's a lot of me just kind of bashing monogamy just in general, like just being like, I think it's basic, I think it's boring, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, my only real qualms is the social institution as a whole around monogamy and mononormativity.
Yeah.
That is my only real beef. It's just the institution in general. Every part of whatever, every part of how they've just bastardized love, and and that's what I'm
Yeah.
really coming for when it comes to my artistry. But it's like trying to get that through people's like heads and their mindsets. It's like I don't really know how to describe it. It's like, because I feel like I mean, it's like it is oppression. It is a thing. Like it is like there is a lot of really horrible attitudes towards, especially women and LGBTQ plus that are polyamorous or realize they're polyamorous or non-monogamous. But it's like at the same time, it feels like you're not going to get this cut dry kind of like like homophobia. It's not this cut and dry. It's so weird. Like I feel like some people are more prone to the
Yeah.
understanding of it, but then at the same time, not at all. Like not at all. Like not absolutely
Yeah.
100% invalidating. Damn near trying to use science to invalidate it. Blah blah blah. Even though, like I said, I've always acknowledged how things can be. It's like I will always, like, I already know that science backs up pretty much everything in regards to like LGBTQ plus and even polyamory and non-monogamy. But it's
Yeah.
like, God, it's like it's already there, man. It's like, how could you not sit there and believe that people's brains, like everybody's like bodies or brains, are wired differently? Like there are people who I believe there are people who are wired to be monogamous as much as they're wired to be polyamorous and non-monogamous. It's just the fact that you created such a toxic environment for one demographic to not even be able to exist properly. And now we're finally kind of snapping out of it and coming out of it. And it's like, don't get mad at us if we want to start trying to like really completely deconstruct all of this stuff for you. Because at the end of the day, what they did to all of this, it affects everybody. It affects every single person. It is
Yep.
ugly. It is evil. It is with malicious intent. And it's more in detriment to our people, indigenous people, black people, so on and so forth. It was first and foremost for that reason, because they knew how powerful we were. They knew what we could be, and now it's like we're in this space right now more than ever to really take it all back. Really in the most defiant sense, and that's what makes me so excited for like this upcoming year with my new album and everything that I have sort of planned out, mapped out. It's like it's gonna get crazier. But that's the point.
Yeah.
It's like you
Yeah.
have to be able to live in defiance of a world that was always so anti you. You have to
Yeah.
be there and at the same time form that sense of community, because the reality that everyone never, like I said, we say it all the time, but I feel like no one ever fully does really accept it, is that you're not the only one. You're not the only one
Yeah.
that feels the way you do, that sees things the way you do. And like I said, anyone within the spectrum of whether you are polyamorous or non-monogamous listening to this, or whether you're just trying to be an understanding person, is that you're never alone in regards to these dynamics. There are people here obviously working to change things constantly. And, more and more of this positivity and love is just destined to be wrapped around us, who we are. And I, I only want to be that contributor to that, you know what I mean? To give authentic, give real, and I just, more than anything, I just want to be so real. You know what I mean? It's kind of interesting
Yeah.
because like it's, I don't even, this is probably kind of interesting to say, but so had my experiences with women, but I kind of just lost my, I kind of just lost my V card when it comes to men. I think it's kind of the weirdest, weirdest cadence, because I'm like, this whole
Well,
process is so unique for me
congratulations.
that I'm like bringing it up once again. It's like, this whole entire, like I said, attitude in regards to, in regards to like polyamory or non-monogamy, and even obviously still around LGBTQ plus stuff, it's like, gosh, even like I said, like South Dakota is such a hard place to be in, like if you're any of these demographics, like it's just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And it's like, like this man is like, it's a pretty similar cadence, very much like jock type kind of guy, whatever. And he's giving very closeted bisexual, but it's like, it's whatever. But it's that kind of reoccurring theme that I feel like I'm always constantly like dealing with. It's like, I'm glad that, like, I knew this for a long time, and it's the same thing with polyamory. It's like, I knew this for a long time, and it's like, damn, like I just want to create like anymore. It's like, I just want to live free now, and then just give more people that opportunity to be able to experience everything that they want whenever they want, And it's like, I know damn well that I wanted this a long time ago. Like, I know damn well. It's like, it's like, it's sad to know that because of dealing with this anti vibe towards polyamory, it's like, damn, it's like that perpetual sense of like heartbreak because you were sent, in some way, shape, or form rejected for that. You know what I mean? It's like, me,
Yeah.
it's still a thing where like, because I include that I'm polyamorous in like my dating stuff or whatever. And the idea that I could even be like rejected solely for that is such a weird cadence. And I think a big thing that I want to see change dramatically is like that deal breaker mentality around polyamorous individuals, where it's like, because
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to be monogamous, and I pretty much tell people that inevitably that like that's a deal breaker for somebody. It's like, I think that inevitably, it's like, when I think of women, it's like, I can still be everything that you want. It's just the only slight difference is that I just am polyamorous. I don't, like, I can give you everything. I can give you the whole 9 yards. It just depends on whether you can do that, and that's okay. If you can't, but at the same time, if we can, progress to a point where that's not a deal breaker, like I just said, that's going to be a lot. It's just inevitably going to be a lot healthier than anything else, because I think that, especially in regards to polyamory, you're like forced to confront a lot of the emotional issues. I think that you just end up really addressing a lot of those insecurities and addressing, you know, needed or boundaries that can come down or something. Like, you learn
Yeah.
more and more about yourself, because now like I said, once again, it's a real benefit. It's like when you actually, see, especially women, but you actually like view your partners as like these very valid, nuanced people, then you can kind of get to like the root of various issues much quicker, and then
Yeah.
like, and having those more perspectives in regards to everything, it's just like, it gives you really a lot more room to develop your sense of self, like, and it's just goes back to like how much it is more disappointing with all that representation. It's like you didn't even show the ones that could be gorgeous or that are gorgeous and that have gotten so many things going for themselves because of the fact that they live in this dynamic and they're communicating and they're being real, and it's like the potential that is there that I think never gets fully tapped in because everyone's just constantly kind of invalidating this experience and trying to write it off quickly because it's hard, like that kind of whole.
Yeah, yes. It is toxic monogamous culture has definitely set it up so that we do not fully put in the work for a lot of things. And so I was talking about this where it's like, when you're in a monogamous partnership with someone, you're not going to break up at the first sign of trouble,
Mhm.
right? You're like, okay, we got to work this out, especially when you live together, you share finances, you share a family, whatever. You're going to do the thing. And people just don't view polyamory with that same seriousness. And then when we talk about representation on media, it's just monogamy
Mhm.
2.0. They just show you a triad. They're like, this is what it is. This is the triad. Is this exactly what you guys want?
Right.
Right? It's like it's the same picture. Just like I don't know if you've seen those memes like the answer is like no or no in pink. Like closed triads are just no in pink.
Yeah,
Same thing.
yeah.
It's the same thing.
Exactly,
And
exactly. Oh.
so we're just trying to step away from that kind of
Mhm.
culture and the whole relationship escalator idea as well. It's like, why do we have to be, dating,
Mhm.
living together, engaged, married, kids? Why does it have to
Why
follow
does
that
it,
trajectory? Why can't we just let relationships be what they
exactly.
are? And why does it have to be kitchen table? Why does it have to be parallel? Why can't we just ultimately decide what kind of interaction and relationships we want with ourselves? But that only comes from the very deep, meaningful work of knowing exactly what you want and what you are capable of giving to other people is very necessary to have a fulfilling polyamorous
Exactly.
lifestyle, because otherwise you're up shit creek without a paddle.
Exactly. Otherwise, it's just the same. It becomes like the same shit that you deal with monogamy. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's a
Yeah.
reflection of how they set it up. And it's like, oh gosh, there's just too many things that obviously where the patriarchy just ruins all of it. And it's like from
Mm-hmm.
the obviously what we already talked about, the unicorn hunting, to the one penis policy. I literally flat out, I'm to a point where now that I'm obviously more comfortable, I feel like now I'll be more prone to mention that during performances. It's like if I talk about being polyamorous and suddenly men get any ideas, I'm like, you can stop right there. See
Yeah.
women as fully valid and autonomous, thinking, breathing people that deserve rights and deserve to be properly respected and acknowledged before you do any of this crap. Because it's like at the end of the day, like the hardest thing is when we deal with this world, it's like that definitive dynamic where like I've had to accept that my mom and my aunt were they're troubled women. I mean, they grew up in they're all indigenous Lakota women, full blood Lakota women, that were adopted away from their people, and the nuance of everything they dealt with. I get it regardless, like, and it's like it sucks that I didn't have like the best mom. It sucks that I didn't even have necessarily my best aunt, because they're twins. They're both my mom and my aunt. They're twins, and but I grew up with them, and it was hard to, like, to some degree have that
Mm-hmm.
sense of like internalized misogyny because of like how my mother was. And so I,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had these predetermined mindsets like around women, and it's like seeing how I obviously wasn't like this, but I grew up even watching my oldest brother, an aggressively toxic masculine man, whatever, all the generic stuff that men are into. He was abusive to my grandmother, and it's like I feel like I just constantly witnessed like I just witnessed at every turn what women go through, but then like how much it sucks
Mm-hmm.
when they are toxic, when they are this. It's like it's hard. It's like I understand why women are when they are a mess or when they are this, but it's like it's more insane and incredibly gaslighting when it doesn't take into consideration everything that women deal with on a day-to-day basis, and
Yeah.
then how that plays into their love lives and how that would play into whether they're into monogamy or polyamory. And it's like more than anything, it just made me pay attention more than ever. And it's like I I wanted to make that direct correlation in my artistry. Within Yamni, it was like I wanted to really full on show everything. It's like, yeah, it can be pretty raunchy or sexual, but there's a lot of pure and divine energy, especially when it pertains to our women that I hold, especially when I'm in these. Like if I was in a triad or if I ever end up in a quad fully, it's like women are held in a certain regard to me, and it's just in the regard that my ancestors did it, where they're given that space, they're given that cadence to be everything they are. They're not weighed down by me, they're not weighed down by, like, where I've seen that prettily. Oh, it's like, is in Indian country, it's a lot worse than people want to talk about, of how much suppression there really is for our women. And I'm hoping that more dialogue can be really had around that, because I've seen a lot of women never really, I guess, blossom fully, because they were held down by a jealous, controlling man. And it's usually one of
Yeah.
those really presentable couples too, like socially presentable, and then it kind of, like, later on the line, maybe they finally split, and you realize how, she ends up talking about how messed up he was. And it's really sad. It's really heartbreaking to see that. And I'm hoping that, obviously, with, presences like mine, and hopefully a lot of other things, that more of that stuff can just come to an end, and that more men will take that initiative, and especially now, like, that was what now, and, like, relaying back to, like, even what Axel was about, that was the same cadence. I wanted to sing about the complications or the dilemmas around men, and the toxic environments that they had made for themselves, and what they did to everybody else that wasn't cis het
Yeah.
monogamous or whatever. And it's something that, it's a process, you know what I mean? Inevitably, it's going to be this thing that certain people are going to have to let, things fall to the side, whatever egos, blah, 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 because it's like, want to live in a perpetual state of healing. I want to be healed, and I want to be, but I feel like that will inevitably come from our communities ultimately getting, really, it's like, it's the worst part about all of it is just getting back to how we used to think. Like, we were already
Yeah.
at this place before, and now we're just getting back to it. You know what I mean? Like, of remembering everything that we truly viewed and everything that we truly felt, without the ramifications of colonization hitting us at every corner. But now, the thing that I am more than happy about is just seeing such, like, it's there. You know what I mean? The wind of change is just there, and more understanding, more and more love is being put into this world. And I think even more so, I guess, obviously, with the ramifications of a lot of people are really feeling all of this and seeing all of it. And there's a lot of people I'm really excited about. Obviously, shout out to Anti-Mononormative. I love her so much. She's literally incredible, and I'm glad that she's starting to get that uptick too. We have
Yes.
some.
Yes. She's
We have
wonderful.
some really cool stuff planned. They're amazing. And it's like, I want to see that. I'm like, I am ready for you to take this over as this
Yeah.
indigenous woman, like, the coming to the frame. Because even now, it's like, yeah, I want to see more of our BIPOC representation in regards to this, because they've always been there, and they'll always continue to be there, and they'll always continue to be the more nuanced voice than the white poly. It's how it was designed. And so it's like, now it's just fully stepping into frame and being here and being present, regardless of whatever people have to say. The same rhetoric, pretty
Yeah.
much. It's weird, because it's like, whenever I hear, like, conservative TikTok exist, whenever I hear that side exist, it's weird when it's like the same regurgitated thing over and over and over again, and then they get debunked over and over again, but they still will say the same things, even though they've already been debunked.
Listen, it's like, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, don't tell me it's a squirrel, IG, because it's like, I feel like we're not on the same
Yeah,
page here.
yeah.
At least tell me it's like a mockingbird. Like, at least tell me something different, but don't tell me that it's a whole separate
Mhm.
thing. They will always be debunked. It's so funny you brought up anti-mononormative, because she posted something the other day that I want your
Mhm.
opinion on. It's a post about anti-colonial reasons to stop using the terms ethical and consensual non-monogamy. I don't know if you
Well,
saw that
mhm,
post.
mhm,
And so it's definitely something I have never thought of in this way before. And of course, I'm going to link it in the show notes. And, he pretty much describes what ethical and consensual non-monogamy
mhm,
is, and says that despite the good intentions behind the popularization of these terms, there are still harmful colonial implications that come with explicitly framing general non-monogamous practices as ethical or consensual. And it's, again, this is something I have never thought of in this particular
mhm,
way. And reason one is that, the use of the term ENM, or ethical non-monogamy, implies that non-monogamy is inherently
mhm.
unethical. and that you have to. And forms of non-monogamy originally practiced by indigenous peoples have been historically seen as primitive or savage or uncivil. And language that frames non-monogamy as inherently unethical perpetuates the same colonial mindset to justify the valid imposition of modern normativity on indigenous
Mm-hmm.
people. And I was like, damn, I ain't never thought about it like that.
Right. It's
Like,
so real. I mean, I had seen that discourse, and then it's like seeing her
yeah,
parlay it. I think even more. It's actively what it actually really is happening when it comes to people who are still using, because like I said, there's still people using those terminologies, and it's very much like it is real. You know what I mean? The actual practice of non-monogamy has nothing to do. The ethics are already there because you're already engaging with people that are there for it, and then it's weird. It gives off very like they're kind of like they're framing it from the mindset of a monogamous person, with the cheating. Oh, it's cheating, or oh, it's
yes,
and then they're
exactly.
also what's even weird because like when I hear consensual, it just they give it very R wordy, that kind of essay. It's like I'm like,
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
disgusting. That is the first thing that I would think when you say consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy. I'm like that in itself is anti-indigenous. Like, yeah, that in itself is just ugly, and it's something actually
yeah,
that like definitively just needs to be like stricken from people's verbiage, because vocabulary is everything. The way you're wording things is everything. And what you're implying with ethical non-monogamy or consensual non-monogamy is that basically, in a nutshell, any form of non-monogamy somehow is happening with without the discretion of I guess the primary or who whatever. Like it's basically still putting and framing monogamy as the only sort of valid approach to love. And we obviously know that's not reality, and it never has been. It's literally just a product of literal delusions, propped up by literally an institution that like desperately needs to keep this in place so that it can kind of keep this sort of conveyor belt existence that comes with capitalism. And a good way to do that is keep people stuck and trapped in monogamous situations. Of course, make sure that they end up cranking out some babies, so they have to tend to those babies, and no matter what, continue to keep things as they are, basically continue to keep status
yep,
quo. So that's really messed up, that the idea that like it's like in a messed up way you almost ethically can't like you almost ethically can't be like straight anymore because of how messed up they made it, or you can't like ethically be monogamous to some degree. Like it's weird, but it's like because there's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with if you are anything under the cishet mononormative white patriarchy. If you're any of these things, white, a man, cis, straight, monogamous, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. But it's the way we're socialized, it's the way you are treating those that don't fit those demographics. It's a multitude of other things that come into play that inherently harm everybody involved. So this is 100% about not only because it's not even in regards to just me decolonizing as an indigenous person. It's also you. It's also everybody. I truly believe that we all do come from cultures and languages inevitably that at one point had fully accepted these things. These were things that had happened. They weren't signs of. They were actually signs of our own awareness, well, of what we knew about the human experience and how nuanced it always was, especially prior to colonization, and how much room people had to live authentically, especially amongst their own people. It's just such a crazy sort of paradigm to be in, to see how everything transgressed, and now here we are, like we're in this place right now to see things dramatically change for the better. And that's what I feel like I've been trying to push for, because I've had my moments, and once again, anti-mononormative, she had put up a cadence, or a post about the perpetual sense of heartbreak she feels in regards to growing up in a world that is just so aggressively anti-polyamory, anti-non-monogamy. And so sometimes it feels like, especially when you are that love is not as attainable It gives you this weird
Yeah.
sense of like hopelessness because you present that you're polyamorous, somebody will turn you down for it. Or present that, you talk about it and you're going to have somebody that, just completely invalidates the experience as a whole. And once again, it's like, it's hard. Like for me, one thing that I think that is so kind of complicated in my own experience, and it makes me wonder, maybe that's why, but it's like I always found it easier sometimes to have lovers than friends, only because I think that there's a lot of things that even how obviously how love and relationships have played down and how that hits our friendships, even in our platonic relationships. I have found that a lot of the times I don't know, I feel kind of suffocated in certain situations, and I feel more liberated when it comes to having lovers. I feel like I'm having at the same time of having lovers, I'm also having the friends that sometimes I feel like it's hard to have in this kind of space or this world sometimes, especially in pertinence to those who I'm intimately close with. I have found that it's much easier to keep people in that way. And so then that once again, dealing with that anti-poly stuff, it's like, damn, I'm still not like, it's really difficult being obviously in a situation where you're like, especially in my cadence of like being with a woman and she's not like really, like, she just wants to be with me, whatever, blah blah blah, like that was ultimately like the worst, most uncomfortable thing in the world to me. Like when it came to women, it was like, oof, I don't want to do this generic monogamous situation. I don't want to, like, because I know that like that's not all I want, and I know that's like it's like that's really sad to have to give that cadence to like people where there's like something else going on and you can't really say anything. Like you can't really be sincere about your own feelings or emotions and really divulge into it,
Yeah.
because people have made people have created their own emotional circumstances around love to be so sensitive, like the previous kind of one of my previous like guys that I was like involved with, you know, it was kind of that same thing. He was in like a failing marriage and he maybe still is. I don't know. But the mindset was like, I felt like he wanted to like leave her to be with me. And he knew that I came out to him, it was like, this was about 2019, out of 2019. I was just on the front page of Native Hoop magazine. And that's when I kind of just put it in there. In my article that I came out publicly, and I remember hearing his reaction to that and how much that like really deterred him away from me in a lot of different ways when I had acknowledged that. And it was so crazy to think, like, it's such a crazy cadence to think about, but it's like, damn, how perpetually like weird or heartbreaking that is, especially it's like wanting to have certain things in place and wanting to have every piece of what you feel like is your love story. And it's like, it's kind of hard because I feel like I don't even want to sit there and be like, say to men I'm involved with, like, to be like, well, at least you're the only guy because I don't see any other guys. I was like, I mean, that is how I feel, but it's like, it's annoying that I have to like kind of emphasize this certain cadence and say like, well, I want women and we can like, I feel like I have to like really like ram home like how this man's gonna benefit from this situation. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's gross. That's like weird. and
Yeah.
and but it's also like sad to me where it's like we're with the state of how men have been socialized, that it's so incredibly ugly. And obviously being involved with this man that for all intents and purposes presented that he's closeted, that he's this and this, and that he's even been in poly situations, but he had his heart broke because the women left him. Like, it's a lot of things that like, maybe this is red flags. Man,
Yeah, I mean, those kind of look like red
yeah, I know those are
banners to
bad.
me. Those are banners. Like, like when you run to the finish line in a race, those were the big red lines in front of you. Like
Like, mhm.
you break them. You don't like, you don't stay in them.
Yeah, that's why I was pretty content. Like I wrote a record about him, like, I still love and care about him, but like I wrote a song and it was just, I don't know, it was just, I'm glad that situation ended. I'm glad that certain other situations didn't pan out, because at the end of the day, here I am being able to live more freely, authentic, and find ways to, I don't know. I think a big thing that I'm trying to figure out right now is I really want to be full time with music, and I really want this, and this. I want TikTok to be, I'm glad that I'm where I'm at right now. I have a lot of room for just blowing up right now, but I'm just trying to figure out what's next. What do I do? How do I keep people engaged? How do I gain more people, etc.? How do I get more of my music out there, just in general? Because even having that's the thing about TikTok that makes it so interesting, is even having I'm at almost 4,700 followers on there, and it's I could possibly be more well known because of the modern warrior push to the use of my music and how much it's been somewhat pushed out there already. It's I could be somewhat of a more known figure than a lot of other people with higher follower counts and stuff like that. And that part of me is so sentimental to me, especially in regards to the fact that my main song that has the most attention on it is a polyamorous love song. And the next song at the same time is also the same thing. It's that's so cool. That's really nutty that I'm creating that space for, polyamory to be kind of seen and heard in such a way. But like I said, I'm always just kind of man. Because then I just get I'll have those random men that just I don't know. It's not they're trying to entertain it, but they're just really I don't know, into it. And I'm I don't know, this still feels weird. I was I don't know. I'm and maybe it's okay because you're cute, but still, I'm I don't want this to become a DM where it's so me and my wife think you're very cute. And
oh yeah, that weird couple at the bar that just they've been watching you all night, they've been buying you drinks, and then they come over and hey, my wife and I are just wondering if you'd like to go for a nightcap at our place.
I know, it's so fun, and that's the thing. And I think that comes with oh, I got long hair, and I guess I'm kind of cute or whatever. I'll have that same. I feel I'll go through what bi women go through, full of the fact that I could be pretty enough to pass, but it's it's such a weird cadence to even be in those situations. I was God, that's so strange. But
it's weird. It's always the most random couple pairing too,
yes.
because they send the hottest person forward, always on purpose, right? And this is not degrading people's looks or whatever. It's just objectively aesthetically pleasing according to white, supremacy, heteronormative standards, right? So they usually send the wife because she's hot, she's fun. It's oh my god, hey, you're so cool, let's buy drinks, da 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 da. And she's chatting you up, she's doing the thing, and then it's oh, this is my husband, Gary. There's no one named Gary, guys. It's just Gary's a fake Gary. And then Gary comes over, you're okay, so what are you doing over here with me? And she's well, Gary and I noticed you earlier, and we think that it would be great for us to keep hanging out. And you're just sitting there
I would have clocked out right at "we think." I was oh, I know.
Yeah. Once you say "we," it's over. It's over. It's over. So we know the best way not to pick you up. So how are you living and loving right now? What is your current polycule situation, if you don't mind sharing?
Right now, I would say, because there's a lot of like I said, I'm not even mad at the whole construct of oh, polyamory is single, whatever, blah blah blah. Because in a way, you kind of still are. I mean, obviously, just with different parameters, because you do already have committed relationships. You know what you can personally handle. And I was my mindset was even if I guess that 3 wifeys and a hubby dynamic couldn't exist. Just for reference, every all these characters in my story are all based on real people, women, and particularly a guy in my life. For me right now, I'm kind of just in the place of trying to decide of whether certain relationships are going to be the cadence of fully pursuing. I'm still involved with the woman that my project Yamni is about, and we're in a different place. She has a few different partners, and I just have maybe potential guys, and that's kind of my space. And I've also been trying to get into this full cadence of being fully familiar, letting myself experience and feel everything, I guess, both the women I want to the men I want. And it's still a lot of that nuance, but I would say at least just, I think 2. It would just be a woman and kind of a guy that's sort of maybe it's like I said, men are what they are. It's that you know them more than me even. And but it's a process, I think, and I've also been trying to learn how to navigate, I think, just the sexuality aspects of everything too, and fully, I don't know. It was like I said, it was like the idea that I even the fact that I disclosed that I got my V card taken from a guy from my first time with a guy. I said that on the Monogamish pod, and I think that's so fun. But yeah, I mean, yeah, right now it's the building place. It's kind of weird because with this girl, I'll just say her name's Yamni. Like with Yamni, she is very much my lane and very much my vibe. It was kind of weird with how I kind of felt about her, and I don't know if you've ever felt this in pertinence to your own situations, but it was like, damn, because what's more common for her is that she's very, very comfortable with like those dynamics when like a couple approaches her, etc. She's had a lot of that happen, and she even ended up in a dynamic, and she was in a dynamic where
Oh.
the guy ended up leaving that other girl for her.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so she's had really more so, but at the same time, she's also had very much, she kind of ebbs and flows between those group poly situations to solo poly. That's kind of her. And I always thought she would be the perfect third girl. Like that's how I always thought. It's such a weird cadence. It's such a weird thing to like think in my head. It's like, I was like, okay, wait, that just sounds so weird. But it's also like, I feel like there are people that sometimes are more suitable to come into relationships at certain periods. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like we would be more compatible after, I guess, I've met either, another girl or two other girls, whatever. If I develop like a triad, like she would be perfect because she really feels what she wants in those situations. If she ever is invited into it, she's had like enough of those experiences, and all the main thing is always usually just that trust and communication. Obviously that's like intertwined, especially with those who take themselves seriously when they're polyamorous, and you start to really kind of look at that nuance and look at that feeling. But that's what I thought was like one of the more interesting situations. Like, me and her have been like really inseparable, and we've kind of been really dissecting. She even actually appears on the album too. Yeah, it's like really like, she's very much intertwined. We're in an interesting place, I think, now more than ever, because she's so like, when are we gonna do this? When are we gonna do, like, she's very much, I don't know, she's just very, very open. And that energy is what I feel like she was inevitably what actually helped me like come out and accept my sense of self. Because it was especially when we initially had tried to start our relationship, it was more so like I just really like I hadn't gotten to my current apartment now, and I was just still struggling with things. Obviously, once again, I just hadn't fully accepted everything, and now it's like, oh wow, I can fully kind of dive into this dynamic, and right now we're just kind of feeling where things go. And she currently has her nesting dynamic kind of situated for the time being, but she's a very, very interesting and complex Lakota woman. And so, and I think that kind of comes with it. I think that inevitably those who I think realize they're polyamorous, it was just like, I don't know, you're going to get a whole different kind of brand of people, especially those who are very cognitive and very aware of a lot of the social issues that kind of come into this realm. And when you start to really embrace this, and like, you feel it all, obviously you feel the weight of everything, I guess, like, and the effects of cishet mononormativity, and it's like, we're both pretty fluid beings as a whole when it comes down to it, especially even in regards to how she experiences her gender as well. And it's definitely, it's a learning process. It's an absolute learning curve in a nutshell, but I've never felt more proactive towards it. I've never felt more like just real. And I've never felt like, I always kind of imagined that maybe that's how it was going to be, that like, oh, I was going to have the group dynamics with women, and then I was going to have my boyfriend to the side that, that's just outside of the dynamic. But now more than ever, I've really gotten comfortable with the whole construct of like solo poly. And I've been told, obviously, you've heard probably the same discourse where usually that's probably actually a lot better than group dynamics. That's usually like the main representation. There's literally no representation of like solo poly, damn near. Wow.
No, there isn't. It's unicorns.
Yeah, unicorns and nothing. Whether like it's like no sincere group poly, no really none, absolute zero fucking solo. And that's like, even like, that's like, to me, like, that's one of the most, it's like kind of hard thing for me to process. I can see it being easier because, once again, it's separate people, separate relationships that are like, no group dynamics. But I'm like, that to me could be something that could be like a plot of an interesting show. Like, you could have like a naturally just solo poly, whoever, be in the world and navigate that experience as a whole. Like, I feel like that would be something so interesting. Like, sometimes I think it would be more interesting than group dynamics, to be honest. Like, I was like, I've come across them, obviously, like those who are solo poly, and it's like, damn, you bad. Like,
Thank you very much.
I was like, oh, so like, now it's like, maybe I do need to entertain this as as a thing, or as like a possibility. But for now, it's like, I just see. I mean, it's like, now more than ever, it's just, I don't know. Like, I'm glad that like shit, the things are just like transgressing in such a like beautiful kind of path, in a beautiful path forward. No matter, the digressive conservatives that like to try to, like the Texas abortion thing to a multitude of other things.
Yeah.
It's, it's hard when, inevitably we're going to see that. We're going to see the kickback. You know what I mean? We're going to see this motion to maintain the status quo, to continue really just gain for the few and the rest are screwed, basically.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to have happen to us
Yeah,
anymore,
we're
right? Like, I'm sorry. We said it here. Fuck white supremacy. We're not about that life.
And fuck low key, fuck anybody benefiting from it. Anybody that's trying to maintain this shit, like anything.
Yeah.
Because the hardest thing that I think a lot of people deal with when it comes to the social infrastructures is that the weirdest thing is that everybody can benefit off of it. But the problem is that inevitably, no matter what, you get to a certain point of money, there is no way you could have that kind of money without hurting and exploiting people, without stepping on people. There's no way. Like, people say it's not ethical to be a billionaire. Damn near, you couldn't even be really a millionaire. It's not even ethical to almost be that. Like, it's not like it like the only path forward is getting to even like what was like the implications of, I guess, that time period. Once again, obviously there's still craziness, but what Dwight Eisenhower did in regards to that whole, he like taxed the rich 90% and like the middle class was really booming. If anything, if we're even going to maintain the current structures as they are, bare minimum, it needs to have that mechanism in place so that people have the room to live comfortable, healthy lives, to be able to just live and be here and enjoy themselves and so on and so forth. I mean, if we're, like I said, if we're still going to deal with this, we have to still manage to fucking push things to a place where we're not climate change to species and,
Listen, we are, the world is fucked right now. I know it. But you know what? I want to end on a positive note. I want us to just be hopeful. Let's be hopeful. Like, we are actively working to disband these structures.
Exactly.
And I think that, of course, I can't speak for Indigenous people because I am not one of them. But for sure, that is why I want to highlight Black and brown and non-white polyamorous voices and highlight those in the community, because I feel like once you start listening to the people who are severely disenfranchised and actively, because we're not the only ones disenfranchised, right? Like, white women are also harmed in this thing. Just because they're white, yes, they are protected from some things, but they are women, so they are still harmed. Like, we need to start protecting the people who are most at risk, most disenfranchised, and just, I don't want to say get back to our roots, but also get back to our roots. Community development and what we actively want to see and take care of each other in this world. And I think that's it. Like, let people be who they are within reason. Obviously, we don't want, horrible people running around the place, but let's let our communities thrive the way they were meant to, and not under the weight of white supremacy and toxic monogamy. And that's my vaguely sensible.
No, it's to a T. Inevitably, we know what I feel like inevitably we know the direction things need to take, and the only thing that we can do is continue to push things that direction. We can only continue to snap people out of the colonial paradigm that we're all suffering under in some capacity, and to shape things in a way that is more loving and nurturing and just more open and more honest and more real and especially for our babies. We're over the paradigm of living a lie, in every way, shape, or form, not just being closeted, whether, closeted LGBTQ plus or closeted polyamorous. It comes with so much more than that, and the more of us that are coming into light and coming into form and respecting ourselves and loving ourselves enough to stick up for ourselves, we'll only see more of the beauty. We'll be able to give our future generations the ability to experience this world better than, we did, so on and so forth, but still also make beautiful experiences even while we're here. For as long as I'm here to be that beacon of change. I'm here to be a part of that. I'm here to be, hopefully I would love to just go mainstream and obviously be the biggest, one of the biggest beacons, but at the end of the day, we need as many people as a whole, in this struggle, in this fight against all this stuff. And, for anyone listening, know that you are appreciated and loved, that, you are here and present and willing to hear these very, for some people, like I said, for some people, it'll be like, kind of like, whoa, but that's the point, because these things have always been here. Who we are is like always been here, and it will continue to, and all we can do is foster better places, foster better spaces, and more love. Love, 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 love. It's always boiling down to love.
Yes, leading with love. That is a thing. So, Wanbli, thank you so much for joining me today. Why don't you tell people where they can find you? Plug everything. Tell them where they can find you.
So the most common thing is at Wanbli Ceya, which is WANBLICEYA, all lowercase. You can find me on TikTok, on Facebook. My Instagram's a little different, but you will see it if you just type in Wanbli Ceya. But it's Wanbli Ceya 9. My music as an artist under my name Juke, uppercase JUQ, is on all streaming platforms. I'm on YouTube. I'm literally just on everything. And I have a lot more stuff planned within this coming year with my debut album next year to TikTok and just kind of expanding things. And I'll be releasing my website. I'll be having a lot more stuff for you guys. So just feel free to look up everything. Let me know that you heard me from Monogamish Pod if you do, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I'm everywhere. So, and I will be even more everywhere very, very soon. So
yes, of course. And I'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes, like I said. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. And I'll be seeing you again next time.
Sounds good.
Once again, I'd love to thank Wanbli for joining me on today's podcast. You can find all of the links to where to find Wanbli and his music under the name Juke in our detailed show notes at monogamishpod.com. You can also listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts or watch it on our YouTube channel. Just search for Monogamish Pod on YouTube, and there I will be. You can find us on social media at Monogamish Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us on Patreon, where you can get the tons of blooper clips that I made in its intro and outro. Patreon.com/monogamishpod. There are tons of other places you can find us. You can support us in our merch shop, monogamishpod.threadless.com. You can just support me by sharing these podcast episodes with your friends and your family, writing reviews on Apple Podcasts, 5 stars if you please. And you can find me personally at Have You Met Jhen on Twitter and Instagram and on my website. And I think that's all I have for you today. To catch you back here in 2 weeks for a very vigorous discussion about hierarchy with our special guest. Can't wait to talk to you then. XOXO. Bye, guys.